Hello, so this is another video for Hispanic Heritage Month, so encouraging Hispanic girls to grow.
Good afternoon. How's everyone doing? Hello. So my mother is one of 12 children that grew up in the barrio in San Antonio, Texas. 12 children, but only 9 survived to adulthood. And in my mother's family, there was a very sad tradition that if you were the middle daughter, you were the designated maid of the family, and you were kept at home, and you helped cook and clean and take care of the younger siblings. So you were basically the second mother. And when my grandmother was a young girl, she too came from a large family, and she was also the designated maid and had to stay home and cook and clean and take care of the rest of the siblings. So my grandmother never went to school. She actually was illiterate. She couldn't read or write. And my mother was destined for this same fate. However, it was a principal at the local elementary school who noticed that my mother was not there. So she got in her car, she came to my grandmother's house, and when she showed up, she noticed that my mother was actually sweeping up on the front porch. There was a party that they'd had the night before. My grandmother comes to the door, and the principal points to my mother and says, "That child will go to school." So basically, the principal had to shame my grandmother into allowing my mom to be able to go to school. And one of the reasons why I am so grateful for the laws of this country is that children have rights. They have the right to a basic education. And so my mother was allowed to go to school. But as soon as the 3 o'clock bell rang, she had to come straight home because she still had to pick up with her chores, the cooking, the cleaning, and taking care of the younger siblings. My mother learned never to ask for anything special because whenever she did, my grandmother would simply say, "Eso no es por nosotros." That is not for us. Our people don't do that. It was always no. And so I heard this story growing up, and I began to wonder, well, why aren't we encouraging Hispanic girls to grow? What is it about the culture that keeps reinforcing some of these behaviors? And then I wondered, well, is anybody else noticing this same phenomena? And it turns out people have been paying attention. According to the National Education Association, they did a study on women in education, and they noticed that Hispanic girls have the highest dropout rate in high school and in college. And they even give reasons as to why this happens. One of the reasons they give is that it is a very macho culture, and so there are these stereotypes that reinforce that women are supposed to be submissive, subservient, be in motherly type of roles. Another thing they noticed is that a lot of the Hispanic girls often have to take care of younger siblings, have to help them get ready for school and make sure they're fed and dressed. If somebody is sick, of course, somebody has to stay home and take care of the sick child. So that leads to lots of absenteeism in school, which then leads for them to drop out and not finish. They also noticed that many Hispanic girls do not get involved in after-school activities, and they don't get involved in sports. So there's no real connection to the school. And then the fourth thing they noticed is a very high teen pregnancy rate. And the girls are coming to high school pregnant, and the high schools are just kind of forcing them out the door. So they're not continuing on further in their education. Well, okay, that answered some of my questions, but then I still wondered, is there something else? So what I want to share with you are some of my observations, some things that I've noticed that might also be contributing to why the girls are not encouraged to grow. One of the things I noticed is the concept of the quinceañera. Some of you may know what this is. The best way to describe it is it's like a big Sweet 16 party, but this happens when you turn 15. It's a big, elaborate event. There's usually some kind of mass or some kind of church ceremony. If you don't have that, then you at least invite the local priest to at least bless the event. After the ceremony, you have your big party, and you have 14 of your closest friends that are part of your attendance, and you are presented with your ultima muñeca, the last doll that you will have as a child. And usually there is a father-daughter dance, and he will present his daughter with her first pair of high heels, symbolizing that she is now no longer a child, she is now a woman. And so if you'll see in some of these images here, this is from one of the local magazines here in Dallas that you can pick up at any Hispanic grocery store. Traditionally, these used to be all white dresses, but now they're becoming much more elaborate, colorful, all kinds of themes. Well, Julia Alvarez, who is one of my favorite authors, wrote a nonfiction work about this phenomenon of quinceañeras. They are just increasing each year. And what she did is she followed around several families and how they went through this process of having a quinceañera. And she, too, noticed some interesting phenomena. One of the things she noticed is that a quinceañera today rivals the cost of an average wedding. That families go deep into debt just to pay for the quinceañera. They're taking out second mortgages on their homes. They ask every family member to contribute something in some way, shape, or form. Some families start saving as early as the moment that the child is born. So they're spending all of this money. The other thing that she noticed is that she would ask the grandmothers and the mothers, she would ask them, okay, well, tell me about your quinceañera. Was it this elaborate? What was your dress like? How was your party? And the majority of the time, they would look at her and say, no, I never had a quince. The town that I grew up in, only the wealthy families had a quinceañera. So there's this interesting phenomena of immigrants coming to this country, bringing a tradition with them that they never even participated in. But in many Latin American countries, quinceañeras are done in the wealthiest societies. These are like coming out parties, like cotillions. So what we're seeing is kind of this keeping up with the Joneses kind of phenomena. You've come to this country, you've started from nothing, and you have built something significant. Of course you want to shower your daughter, you want to give her everything, the best of everything. Well, the other thing that she also noticed is that soon after a quinceañera, I wouldn't say every girl, but a large percentage of the girls after the quinceañera are getting pregnant. Well, think about what this message implies to girls. You've just been told that you are no longer a little girl, you are now a woman, you've basically just had your wedding. And of course, as a woman, you're going to experiment with your body, you're going to explore your sexuality. And so there are some interesting numbers that are coming across. According to the CDC, this is teen pregnancy rates. Even though they have been on the decline, Hispanic girls still make up the highest percentage of teenage pregnancies. And in 2012, they did a study, and out of 1,000 births, 46.3% of those girls that got pregnant were Hispanic. Out of the same group, 20.5% of the girls that got pregnant were white. But the pregnancies and the quinceañeras still don't explain everything. So I continued to investigate further. And what I came up with are what I call Hispanic archetypes. These are characteristics which are still kind of embedded culturally within, that we're still very much being affected by. So I want to share 4 of these archetypes with you. The first archetype is La Virgen de Guadalupe. Now, I'm sure you have seen this image before. It's very iconic. I find it everywhere. It's on t-shirts, it's on cowboy boots, I've seen it on tattoos, you see it on the backs of pickup trucks. It's the story of the Virgin Mary appearing to Juan Diego in 1531. And when she spoke to him in his traditional Nahuatl language. Even the Catholic Church recognizes this as a legitimate event. Juan Diego is the only indigenous Indian to be canonized as a saint. But think about the social implications of the Virgin of Guadalupe. This is the ultimate mother figure. She is put on this pedestal. And we are telling the girls that they need to be like the Virgin Mary. They need to be idealized mothers and good girls and preserve this idea. They're also, within that, they need to be obedient, subservient, they need to obey, they need to do as they're told. And in the case of my grandmother, that certainly was the case. It was the local priest that told her, you need to have as many children as possible, and any extra money you have to give to the church. And then she also passed down this idea to my mother. My mother is the one that explained to me that there were only 2 ways out of my grandmother's house. Either in a coffin or in a wedding dress. And that was it. The second archetype I want to share with you is the story of La Curandera. Now, she is often seen in images and in stories and in society. She tends to be kind of on the outskirts of society. This tends to be an older woman. She's often seen as kind of the medicine woman, the healer. Sometimes she's called a bruja or a witch. You go see her when you have an ailment of some kind, when you don't feel very well. You have to understand, in the barrio, you do not go to the hospital unless you are bleeding out or you're on your deathbed. Everything else you go to the curandera for. She can remove fever, she can remove sickness. You also go see her to get the evil eye removed, the mal de ojo. Someone might put a curse on you, so you need to go see her. And my grandmother very much believed in the curandera and would often go see her to have this evil eye removed. But again, think about the social implications of the curandera. This is a woman that, even though she's on the margins of society, she is greatly feared and respected. Remember, you don't want to upset this woman. She might put a curse on you. Okay? She has secret knowledge of herbs and magic and knowledge, and so you have to tread lightly around the curandera. The third archetype is the story of La Llorona. Now, this is a story that is often told to children at bedtime. So while American children get the stories of Peter Pan and Cinderella, Hispanic children get La Llorona. There are many different versions of this story. I'm going to share with you the version that I'm familiar with. It's the story of a woman who's married and has 2 young children, but she falls in love with another man, and that man convinces her to run off with him. So she abandons her first husband, she goes off with this man, and takes her kids with her. Well, invariably, the man grows tired. He ends up also leaving La Llorona, leaving her with nothing, just her and her kids. And she is so angry, and she feels so betrayed, and she's so hurt. She takes her 2 children, she goes to the nearby river, and she drowns her 2 kids. Yes, this is a bedtime story. And when she realizes what she's done, in her grief, in her sorrow, at that moment she literally turns into a ghost. And she's known to haunt bodies of water, going up and down rivers, searching for her lost children. Well, you tell this story to children before they go to bed. You tell them, if you don't behave, if you don't fall asleep, La Llorona is going to see you in the window, she's going to think you're her lost children, and she's going to steal you from us. Good night. I mean, yeah, that's a lot to take as a child. But think about the social implications of La Llorona. You don't want to be the lady that forever laments things. You don't want to be the martyr. You don't want to be forever sad. There's also that reinforcement of that negative. The last one I want to share with you is the story of La Malinche. Now, this is a true event. In 1519, Cortez showed up and encountered the Aztecs. And when he meets Montezuma, the leader, and this is a very Mexican thing to do, whenever you invite someone to your home, of course you give them a gift. And so Montezuma gives Cortez a bunch of women as a gift. Just like when you go to the Playboy Mansion and Hugh Hefner says, here, have a bunch of Playboy bunnies on me, enjoy. And so La Malinche, known as Doña Marina at the time, she was a captured Indian princess, she was part of that group of women that was given to Cortez as a gift. But unlike the other women, she actually had a gift for languages. She spoke many of the different Indian dialects of the local tribes. And so she quickly learned Spanish. And so she ends up becoming the translator between Cortez and Montezuma. Well, invariably, her and Cortez become lovers. And at night, when they're having their pillow talk, she's telling him the secrets of the Aztec culture. She's telling him the stories of the gods and the goddesses. And unfortunately, Mexican history is not very kind to La Malinche. In fact, she's kind of blamed for the downfall of the Aztecs because she dared to speak the secrets. She dared to give a little bit of knowledge that gave Cortez just enough to find a way into the culture and ultimately destroy it. At one point, Cortez even pretends to be a god that has returned. And so she's blamed for all of that. It was my father that explained to me that you never want to call a woman in today's society a Malinche. Tú es una Malinche. That is an insult. What you're telling her is you are a betrayer, you're a manipulator, you tell secrets, you spread lies, you're up to no good. This is the girl, by the way, in high school that stole your boyfriend. You know this girl, right? Or you've seen her in the clubs. She takes your man. Yes, you don't ever want to be a Malinche. So think about those 4 archetypes, and can you understand how, as Hispanic women, we are getting so many mixed messages. We're told on the one hand to be idealized mothers, and pure and virginal, but be obedient and obey, but don't have too much knowledge, and don't share too many secrets, and don't betray people. That's a lot of different things that we're having to face. So I've decided that I am going to reclaim the word Malinche. We need a 21st century definition of this word. And so, to me, a modern-day Malinche is a woman who is highly intelligent, fiercely independent, and puts education ahead of anything else. And yes, we still have the ability to steal your man, But we won't, because we know better and we have a better sense of self-worth. We don't need your man. So I also thought about how those 4 archetypes affected my grandmother and my mother. Remember I told you how my mother was finally allowed to go to school. And so when she went, she learned how to read. And oh my goodness, she discovered the love of books. She loved stories. She could escape her reality. In fact, her favorite story was Cinderella. And the thing she loved to do the most was to come home, find a little corner in the house, and just sit there quietly and read with her book. And every time that my grandmother caught my mother reading, she would beat her. And I don't mean smacking her across the face. I mean that my grandmother would take this thick, heavy belt and would just beat the living tar out of her, just for the simple act of reading. What kind of parent does that? Why would you take that one little joy from this child? It took me a long time to understand and to forgive my grandmother for that. But you have to look at it from her perspective. My grandmother was illiterate. She couldn't read or write. And in my grandmother's world, there is no time to read a book. There is cooking to do. There is ironing to finish. There's chores to do. We've got to make the tortillas because when Grandpa comes home at 5 o'clock, dinner better be on the table, ready to go. And as I grew up, I kept trying to bring my mother back to books. I kept trying to encourage her to read. And every time I tried, she would just look at me and shake her head and said, no. They literally beat out the love of learning from me. And to this day, my mother does not read books for pleasure. But despite all that happened to my mother, she is a very smart woman. And when she got married and had her own children, especially when she had a daughter, she looked at me and she said, I am not going to do to my daughter what was done to me. And in that one moment of consciousness, she forever broke a generational pattern and changed the trajectory of my life. So I grew up in a household where I was encouraged to have an education. I remember I was never denied the right to have a book. I was always told yes to books. Yes to dance lessons. Yes to piano lessons, violin lessons, marching band. Anything having to do with education, it was yes. The only time she ever said no to me was when I started dating. But then I don't blame her because she was fearful that I would put boys ahead of my education. She wanted me to finish my high school degree. She wanted me to go into college. So that I understand. It took some time, but now I understand. Well, so this is an image of my parents. This is their wedding day in 1960. This is both sets of grandparents. My maternal grandmother is on the far right. And if you'll notice, around her eyes, there's always this tinge of sadness. It's a happy occasion, and she has this sadness. And I've noticed in just about every photograph I have of my grandmother, there's always that sadness. We have to learn to change this conversation for our girls. We have to stop telling them, no, eso no es para nosotros. That is not for us. Our people don't do that. Our people don't go to college. Our people don't read books. We have to become tangible role models. I bet that there is somebody where you work or where you go to school or someplace that you encounter, there is a Hispanic girl that is in desperate need of a mentor, someone to just give them encouragement, someone to see them as a person. It's just the simple act of asking them, tell me your future story. Where do you see yourself 10 years from now? Help me change the conversation of no es para nosotros to si se puede. Yes, we can. Everybody say this phrase with me. Si se puede. Okay, I didn't really hear you. Say it one more time. Okay, one more time with conviction. Si se puede. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you so much.